You had a successful 20-year career in martial arts. What inspired you to make the unusual switch to dog training? And how has your martial arts principles influenced the way you train dogs?
I came to America from Germany. I couldn't speak the language. I was bullied my whole life, when I was a kid. And back in those days, it wasn't like you got somebody on your side.
Robert Cabral is an internationally recognized dog trainer, behavior expert, and leading voice in canine rehabilitation with more than 20 years of experience. He has worked with thousands of dogs from aggressive and fearful cases and is respected worldwide for his clear, fair approach to solving complex behavioral issues. He also created Bound Angels University. Robert is also the author of two influential books, Selling Used Dogs and Desperate Dogs Determined Measures. And in 2025, he was inducted into the IACP International Hall of Fame. Robert continues to bridge the gap between dogs and humans, ensuring every dog has the chance at a safe and meaningful life.
And when I saw these dogs in these kennels, I had just tears pouring down my face. And I was like, wow, every dog I've ever trained, whether it's a shelter dog or a personal dog or a sport dog or anything, I see a piece of myself in every dog. There's a piece of my good side, my bad side. I always say, before you start training your dog, teach your dog how to learn.
Can you describe that moment or perhaps the experience when you realized dog training and rescue work were your true calling?
I think if you're an alpha, then your job is to protect the weaker and to support people who need you. You should be a role model.
You popularized the idea of the binary dog. What does that mean, and how can a simple yes-no communication system improve an average owner's training effectiveness? You had a successful 20-year career in martial arts. What inspired you to make the unusual switch to dog training? And how has your martial arts principles influenced the way you train dogs?
That's a really great question because I first started my dog training business. I named it Black Belt Dog Training in honor of that. And I love the martial arts. I mean, the martial arts really saved my life. I came to America from Germany. I couldn't speak the language. I was bullied my whole life, when I was a kid. And back in those days, it wasn't like you got somebody on your side or you got a lawyer and there was no bullying laws or anything like that. My mother said, you got to learn how to fight. I was single mom raised me. So I got into karate classes and started learning and learned that you don't need to fight to win. So the whole idea of the Eastern style of, peace through knowledge, really something I embraced really heavily. So when I saw dogs, it's such a mishmash story that I got to kind of bounce around on a little bit. When I first had dogs as a teenager, I mean, training was completely out of the question. There was no such thing as training the dog. You just had a dog, you took the dog for a walk, the dog pooped, the dog peed, that was it. So as I got older, I was very busy with my martial arts and with bodyguarding, so I never really had the time to have a dog during the time I had the dojo. And I got one much later. It was a friend of mine who had one, and she couldn't keep him. In the meantime, a good buddy of mine from martial arts, from karate class, used to bring his Doberman, and he was training this dog, and it was a very old school, Bill Keeler kind of training style. So he was doing things, and I was like, wow, it's kind of cool, but it's a little bit hard. And I couldn't say anything because I'm not a dog trainer, right? So I got this Shar-Pei named Silly, and the reason I got Silly was because he was aggressive, and he was a year old. And I thought, well, I'm gonna fix this dog. And I thought, well, I'm just gonna put a prong collar on him, and yank him around, whatever. And that idea went out the window when I looked in the dog's eyes, and I saw this confused dog who didn't know what he was doing wrong. And that really set so much in motion for me. I mean, I went through this whole phase of being a vegetarian, of like trying to donate to animal charities and all these things until when I finally went into a shelter myself. It was in Nashville, Tennessee, when I was living down there for a couple of years. And I was shocked. I literally went in the back. The third visit, I dropped dog food off 2 times. And the third visit, I went in the back. And when I saw these dogs in these kennels, I had like just tears pouring down my face. And I was like, wow, something's got to be done about this. Now, again, I helped my friend train his dog a little bit. I trained my dog Silly. I wasn't really a dog trainer per se, but I thought to myself, if you understand basic biomechanics, right? You want your dog to sit, you want him to come, you want him to do X, Y, and Z. How complicated can that really be? And since I was able to teach young kids karate, I was able to teach old people karate, stubborn people karate, how much more difficult can it be to teach a dog to do something you want them to do? I mean, there's a basic common principle of, give and take, push and pull, and the dynamics of I have something you want, you do what I want, you get what I want. And those things kind of just fell into place with this idea of dog training. And I researched online, I watched some videos and stuff. A lot of the things I didn't agree with. I wasn't really seeing anything that was mind breaking. It was mostly mind numbing at that point. But the process just kind of went through from this idea of teaching kids, of understanding movement, of shaping things, of repeating things, of having patience to see things through, because eventually an animal will learn a behavior if it benefits the animal. Keeping that as simple as possible and blocking the negative and rewarding the positive is really, I mean, it's all dog training is about. I'm always mesmerized how people make dog training so complicated and infuse so much complicated knowledge or language or theories into dog training, when all in all, it hasn't changed much in my mind in the last 20 years. I still think it's really, really simple. And I'm always shocked that people ask me to help train their dog after I've done 2 or 3 sessions. I'm like, well, you got all the knowledge. That's it. That's all you got to know. Um, and people still sometimes don't get it. So I'm amazed that guys like you and I have a business and other people have a business, because I think training a dog is just figuring out communication and reward and consequence, and that's it. But the martial arts led me to dogs because I love teaching kids. I loved giving kids that chance that they didn't have before. And I noticed that, and I've said this 100 times in writings and in interviews, every dog I've ever trained, whether it's a shelter dog or a personal dog or a sport dog or anything, I see a piece of myself in every dog. There's a piece of my good side, my bad side, the little child who got beat up, the little child who was scared, the rage that I have in certain things in my life. I've certain anger issues in my life. I see that, and that's why I think. Um, I mean, we'll talk about it more later, but that's why, like, I have such a passion for shelter dogs, because I kind of get it. I get what messes people up in the head. So that's, I guess,
And, and so the dogs in the shelters are often simply misunderstood, and they weren't given the path to lead them in a life that would have been successful for them, or they just were neglected that got them into that position. And it sounds like that you also developed a certain amount of discipline through the martial arts, and then perhaps learning how to teach students, whether it be kids or perhaps older adults, being patient and understanding that it takes a certain amount of reps. And as you said, clear communication transferred over to how you interact and deal with dogs.
1,000%. I mean, 1,000%, Nate. People are very impatient, and I think it's, if you look at the Eastern society, like, when I'm talking about Eastern society, I'm talking about martial arts. I'm not just talking about
Right.
the culture. It's the idea of doing a punch 1,000 times. There's not like, okay, you punch like this. Okay, that's it. You got it. Okay, let's go on to the kicking. You got okay, here's your front snap kick. You got it. Okay, let's do a side kick. You practice that kick 1,000 times. That's really what it's about. It's about being patient, perfecting something, and continuing to practice that. Like, I take my dog out every single day and I train a focused heel every single day. And my focused heel has always looked good with all my dogs, but I believe in doing it every day because, one, it's that important. And two, it's that connecting. It really, the more you practice something, when you practice something with another creature, like a dog or, let's say, a partner, a training partner, it really you form an amazing bond with them. So yeah, there's a lot of that patient element to it.
The first thing that I teach all my students that I work with when I start working with a dog, and it sounds like you and I are on the same page here, but I focus very heavily, and it sounds like a lot of other really great trainers out there. I was talking to Ivan Balabanov the other day, and a big part of his program is incorporating play, building a relationship, building trust, building healthy motivation. What are some of the ways that you like to build that relationship with a new dog, whether it be a shelter dog or a puppy?
Well, it doesn't matter what it is, right? People always say, well, a shelter dog, how is training a shelter dog different than any other dog? That's really not. It's a creature, it's a being, all creatures look for two things. They look to pursue pleasure and avoid pain. That's it, right? Whether it's a snail or whether it's, us. If you want to break it down, we have sex drives and survival drives and, prey drives and all these other things. But let's keep it real simple. Every creature in the world, I don't want to die. I'm trying to avoid dying every single day. And I'm trying to do something that's going to make me happy every single day. And if I can kind of keep it at that level, it's really, really simple. So the idea of playing with a dog or rewarding a dog or engaging with a dog is not a complicated theory. I think people tend to make it complicated, or they tend to extrapolate out ideas that just really refine back to the same idea, which is what we're talking about. But with me, with dogs, I always want the dog to want to do something. I don't want to get the dog to do something. I want to get the dog to want to do something. So the first process with me, with any dog, is engaging. Is the dog looks at me and there's something positive about that. If that dog turns to look at me, boom, party's on. Yeah, that boy, that boy. Doesn't matter if it's food. It doesn't matter if it's a toy. It doesn't matter if it's your voice, if it's an interaction. It can be anything. Because some dogs in a shelter setting won't take food. Some dogs in a shelter setting, you can't trust them with a toy because you're not going to get the toy back. So you have to determine what that's going to be. And getting the dog to see that I looked at you, yeah, boy, that's a good boy. Boom. That starts to set a marker in the dog's mind of that's going to bring me pleasure. What do I have to do? And I think people miss the ball too much on getting a dog to sit. There's a great example. I was at a humane society in Arizona years and years ago, and they had another trainer there who was using prong collars, which I've got nothing against that. And every dog would get a prong collar, every dog would get a 6-foot leash. That I have a problem with, right? I mean, I hate cookie cutter approaches, whether it's e-collars, food, positive only, purely, corrections. I hate anything like that because it's a sentient being. A sentient being deserves our respect, our love, and our trust. And you don't build that through a cookie cutter approach. So this dog, they said, this dog will not sit. We've tried for 3 weeks. We can't get the dog to sit. And I'm thinking, that's insane. Like, how can the dog not sit? And I watched them with the dog, and the dog wouldn't sit. They could not get this dog to sit. They tried everything. And so I said, just for what's in giggles, I said, take the prong collar off the dog. And they took the prong collar off the dog, and I threw a bunch of food on the ground, and the dog came back to me. I just held it right in front of his nose, a typical, just hold it at the nose, push it back. Boom, the dog sat 10 out of 10 times. But they never thought to step outside the box of this cookie cutter approach. And a lot of times, that's what fails our dogs, is we have a methodology in our minds, but the dog didn't get the owner's manual, right? The dog didn't get that manual that this is supposed to work with me. And sometimes it doesn't. And you can't expect every dog to ascribe to a play type training, but you can certainly teach them that, right? So in other words, if your methodology is going to be, we're going to teach everything through play, which I love. I think it's a great way. It's the way I train my puppy. But we got to teach them that. So the first thing I always say, before you start training your dog, teach your dog how to learn. Give them the tool to understand how to learn, because sometimes they don't know. A lot of creatures understand it, but there are creatures that just don't know how to learn. They're stressed out. They're over the top in nerve bags, or they're scared, or they're super pushy and dominant and don't want to do it. So if you get some engagement with the dog and then teach the dog how to learn, you'll make that learning process fun for the dog. And it doesn't matter if it's a puppy or an adult dog, but that kind of respect and showing them, this is what we're going to do. The dog will learn.
I think what was happening too, based on what you're saying in that story, is there is a percentage of the population that I believe gets confused when they hear certain terms that are often tossed around within the dog training community, such as being an alpha
Mm.
or being dominant, making a dog submissive. And I think when a lot of people hear the word alpha, what that translates to in their mind is aggression. And these people that are trying to be the alpha towards their dog, they're acting in a way that's aggressive. And when we are aggressive towards our dogs, it can often have the opposite of what we're trying to accomplish. It can create issues like resource guarding or other issues that could be based on aggression. And something else that you said made me think about something I love about people who practice martial arts. As you know, I train jujitsu,
Mhm.
and some of the most deadly people that I've met in my life are the most patient, calm, nicest people you'll meet. And I think those traits, when they're transferred into training dogs, ends up greatly increasing the likelihood that that person is going to be successful within this field. One of my first mentors, amazing trainer, Tom Rose. What I loved so much about Tom Rose was how patient he is. There was this one story that I like to tell people about him. We were working on, I don't remember what we were doing. We're in the training building, and I'm over in the back by all the agility equipment. I had my puppy, and he comes over, and it was pretty early in the program. I was a professional student at the time, and he used to wear a necklace that had all the pictures of all the students in the class laminated. So he'd walk up to you, he'd pull it up, and he'd find your picture and like, Robert. And so I could see him in my peripheral while I was with my puppy, and I could tell he's about to say something to me. And he pulls up my image, he looks at me, he goes, Nate, is that broken or is it just bent? And he was talking about a piece of the agility equipment. And I looked down at it and I could tell it was broken. And not long before that, I was in the Marine Corps. So when something goes south, often it's not very smooth. There's yelling. And so I'm thinking, oh no. And I said, yeah, Tom, it's broken. And he looks at me and goes, that's why we use PVC pipe. We just replaced it. And then he walked off with walk, and I'm like, man, I love this guy.
Mhm.
And I've noticed that people who are patient and they don't have things that they feel like they need to prove
Mhm.
end up doing really well. And something else you said resonated with me too was learning the game. This is how I like to say it to new students. Learning the rules to the game really isn't that difficult. What's difficult is practicing it and getting good at it. Are there certain things that you like to have someone who's new within dog training practice specifically to develop skills that is going to aid them within their dog training?
God, that's such a powerful question because I think people often look to perfect skills as opposed to perfecting a mindset. Right? In other words, if I say, "Oh, your food delivery is off," or whatever, I think one of the biggest things that people should strive to learn and do better with their dogs on is connection and timing, and being able to read a dog. And that's something that I mean, I hate to say this, and I think you may or may not agree with me because it's kind of a controversial thing. There are certain people, and I've taught, you know, trainers at the shelter, and I used to teach with my friend Lewis, who passed away. And every once in a while, we would be there and say, "That person's just never ever going to get it." Like there are certain people that can't learn things. There's the master theory: if you practice something for what is it, an hour a day for a year, and then for within 3 years you'll get it. I don't believe that. I think that there are people who can learn, and I think the great number of people can get things, but I think there's a certain small fraction of people that will never get things. And I find it incumbent on myself to be honest with people about that. And sometimes it's seen as me being rude, but I don't want somebody working with dogs who just doesn't get it. They just can't get that connection. People who work with dogs need to, one, have an empathy for the animal, and it can't just be a dollar and cents. I'm going to make so much money by turning out this many dogs, kind of thing. I hate that. I hate anything when it talks about business and stuff. And Larry Crone, I've talked about this before. Um, it's like the people who go, "Oh, I have so many fans on Facebook." I have no fans. I have people who like the stuff I'm doing. I don't believe in fans. I'm a dog trainer. Um, I think people need to focus on the timing, the empathy, and the connection with the dog. And I don't know really if that can be taught as much as it can be learned. And I think there's a big difference that people need to understand, that I can teach a lot of stuff to people just like you can, but there's certain people who can't learn it. They have a learning disability, whether it's intentional or unintentional, they'll never get that connection with the dog. They'll never get that timing or that ability to read a dog's body language. Even if I say, "Do you see what he's doing?" And they go, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, I see it." And 10 minutes later, I have another dog in the yard, and the dog's doing the exact same thing, and they can't read it, you know? So, I think that's a tough thing. I think people need to have a certain natural ability to be able to train dogs, and a lot can be taught from there. I mean, I've seen a lot of really great trainers learn things and, do things for, let's say they're training dogs for 5 years and they're better than people who do it for 25 years because they have that natural connection to the experience. But some people just, I think, will never learn it.
Yeah, and of course, it definitely depends on, for a huge percentage, how much effort they put in. So I
Mhm,
agree. I think there are definitely some people out there where it's just not for them.
mhm.
If someone is learning to become a professional dog trainer, being an instructor at the Tom Rose School, one of the things that attracted me to the school in the beginning was that they had a two-thirds failure rate.
Oh, wow.
And when I talked to Tom about it, he said that when he first started the school, other professionals in the industry told him that if you're going to be charging people to come through your program, you need to give them a certificate. And he said, "No, I'm not going to give them a certificate unless they can actually pass the requirements." And the requirements in his program are based on either real world sports or perhaps police canine training. So they do AKC obedience, novice, utility, open. They do IGP 1 and 3, tricks, and a few different things that the students have to do. And they're tested as if they were being tested, if
Mm,
they were competing in AKC or they were competing in Schutzen. And when I was an instructor there, almost within the first week or 2, I could tell what students were not
mhm,
only going to excel and do really well, but the ones that were going to graduate and the ones that weren't. Because I've always been very obsessed with this, and when I was an instructor, when class would end at 4 or 5 PM, I would stay there, and I would
mhm,
continue to train, and I would continue to work with the students, and we would do bite work, and we would work on obedience. I just loved it, completely
mhm,
obsessed, and I can see the students that were still there after class ended, and they were training till 10, 11 o'clock at night,
mhm.
and then if I went to the training field, I saw the same faces. I kept seeing the same faces everywhere. And lo and behold, those are the ones that would end up graduating.
Yeah.
Even with something like tracking. Tracking is one of those things, if we're talking IGP tracking, it's a very, very time consuming
Yeah.
exercise within the sport. You have to go out there, you have to lay the track, you have to teach the dog the track. You, of course, there's a lot to it, considering wind and the
Mhm,
turns and letting it age and having other people lay it for you. There's a lot of work, but
mhm,
for that as an example, I would tell the students, I'm like, minimum, just get 1 track a day. Do
mhm.
1 track a day. You can't do if you can do 3, great, but do 1. So I think a lot of people that end up not becoming as good as they could be is that they're not on the court playing the game. Do you have anything you wanna add to that? Because I have another question I wanna ask you as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, tracking is a great example. Like, my friend Frank Phillips, who's one of the greatest to ever play the IGP game, he's been helping coach me along on tracking and, on protection and obedience as well. And one of the things I came to him early on with my puppy, I said, he's crazy on the track. Like, he just gets there and he's like tearing through and he's doing this. And he says, "Talk to me when you've done some miles." And that stuck with me, like, if I took it literally, and I don't know if he meant it literally or not, but he definitely made a real strong impact on me. I figure I go out there and I lay a track that's, let's say, I don't know, 300 pace, or let's say for a puppy, 100 paces, okay? So 100 paces is 100 yards, right? That's nothing. And I said it kinda took a different attitude after I heard him say that, and I said, "You know what? I'm not even gonna say anything to my dog until I'm in the mile category." And I have a book, I could show it to you, it's laying over here. Every single day I track, every single day. If I mean, Fridays I don't, 'cause we do agility in the morning, and I try to do it before it's too hot. But and I lay my track, I write my track down, I write down where my articles are and everything. But it's a game of miles. So we've been tracking now for he's 18, 19 months. I've had him since he was 3 months. So 15 months. And, I mean, with the exception of the fire where it was hard for me to find tracking because we were just like living out of the car for a while. Yeah, it's a game of miles. And unless you're putting in miles, you have no reason to ask an instructor, why isn't this working? Why isn't why does my puppy keep looking away from me in a focused heel? Why does my puppy not want to bring the toy back? Well, how many times have you done it? Twice? For a week? Well, man, you got, a long way to go.
That you made me think of something else too, and that's something that would drive me nuts. When I was an instructor, there were certain things that I would see, one of which really frustrated me, and it was the left about turn. So
Hmm.
not the left about turn where the dog goes around you
Yeah.
as you make the turn, so they're not really doing that
Hmm.
left pivot where they're maintaining the position, but the pivot left about turn where the dog stays in
Yep.
the left heel position. When I teach that with a dog, I'm doing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of reps.
Yeah.
And something I would have my students do is I would have them stand in my heel position
Hmm.
and I would say, we're going to walk forward and we're going to do a left about turn. You know, we're doing the left about turn. You're aware of this exercise. Can you perform it as a human, knowing what I'm going to do? And we would do it. And almost always they would slip the position. They wouldn't be correct. They
Right.
wouldn't move right because that movement is very difficult.
Very.
And what I noticed is when trainers didn't want to put in the reps to teach the dog how to do it the right way, what they would end up doing is they would walk forward. And then when they were going to do the left about turn, they would pop the leash a bunch of times on a prong collar before the dog was even fully capable of doing that
Yeah.
extreme physical movement.
Right.
And that's a really great example too, with putting in the miles. You may have heard, and I'll mention his name again, Tom Rose,
Hmm.
but he was the first American to ever get a perfect on a FH track.
Wow.
And I asked him, I said, how did you do that? How much tracking were you doing every day? And we were at his ranch, which I think it's like a 263-acre
Wow.
piece of property, something like that. And he was like, I was pretty much tracking this entire property every day.
Wow.
You just see me tracking the dog all over. And he's like, and I did it every day. And we
Yeah.
tracked, I can't even tell you how many miles. And that's how you get to being at the
Yeah.
champion or
Yeah.
holding up that trophy on the platform.
Yeah.
Uh, the next question I wanted to ask was, you often mention that helping animals just felt like the right thing to do. Can you describe that moment or perhaps the experience when you realized dog training and rescue work were your true calling?
I mean, I think part of it was when I really fell in love with my dog, when I really saw that if I hadn't taken this dog, he would have ended up in the shelter. And the idea for I mean, dogs are often misunderstood, and I think people are misunderstood, and the kids are misunderstood. If you can't connect, and again, it goes back to connecting with that being, connecting with that animal, and I really see myself in so many different animals or people or whatever. So if I see somebody who's, you know, a down and out drug addict on the streets, I think, guy's, a loser. But then I think, there for the sake of God, go I. Like what messed up in his life to put him in that position? So when I see a
Mhm.
dog, I think, what went wrong from the time that puppy was opened his eyes at a few days old, and the time he was 8 weeks old and got into a person's home until today? What happened to that dog that created the being that I'm looking at now, as opposed to this perfect dog like my dog or your dog or somebody else's dog who really cared? um, I mean, I lost sense of the question, but I mean, I think you're getting about what was the transformative picture for me, and I think
Mhm.
it continues to happen to me, Nate. I mean, like, I go to the shelter now. I go down once a week, and I help the shelter in consulting with them. I talk to different shelters and give them input. Um, it didn't just happen. It continues to happen for me. Every time I see a dog, whether it's my dog, it's a dog at the shelter, it's a person with a dog, client's dog, it happens again. And it's this constant, like, boom, hitting me in the head of, you get this, Robert. Like, you've got to be putting this information out there, which is why I I opened a YouTube channel to give it out away for free. Like, let's help people understand this. It's
Sorry,
Yes.
and it brings me back to something I meant to ask earlier. I
Uh-huh.
started to bring it up, but then my ADHD kicked in, where I was talking about, people misinterpreting the word alpha
Mhm.
and how a lot of people perceive that as aggression or being aggressive towards the dog, which of course creates a lot of issues. Now, I believe you define alpha in a different way. Can you share that?
Well, alpha in theory, it means the first, right? It doesn't necessarily, mean the one who's going to beat somebody up. I don't really see as being powerful as a person who's going to beat somebody up who's weaker. I mean, I think if you're an alpha, then your job is to protect the weaker and to support people who need you. You should be a role model. I don't believe the alpha theory. I think it's misinterpreted, just like the word punishment in science. It's misused, and I never ever it goes against the whole science theory. I don't use words that I don't agree with. I don't use the word punishment in the way it's used. Alpha, I don't use it in that way either. I don't believe the alpha is the person who's going to bully the dog into doing something. I think the alpha is there to protect that dog. Me, like I said, I talk about this theory of being the absolute alpha. And I believe 100% in that I have to be the absolute alpha to my dog. But it in no way means my dog is afraid of me. He's not. He jumps on top of me. If we're playing, he's super, super dominant with me. He barks at me, he bites, he holds on, he pulls me to the ground because we have an understanding. And that understanding is that I have only your best interest at heart. I only want you to succeed. I will never let anyone hurt you ever. But in turn for that, you have to respect me and you have to know that I'm going to make the rules. And I can hurt you. I can do those things. But the thing is, and Dr. Jordan Peterson said it, if you have that power, and you don't use it, that's the true power, right? And they said it in
Mm.
Schindler's List too, to have absolute power and not wield it when it's not necessary, that is true power. So, yeah, I do believe our dogs need an absolute alpha, but that alpha refers to a role model, a protector, a guide, a helper, a father, or a mother to the animal that will have the animal's best interest at heart. From there, you take it where you want to take it, but that's how I look at it. It's very different than a lot of people see it.
I agree, and that's usually why I steer away from the word alpha,
Mhm.
because unless I'm taking the time to break it down and explain it exactly the way that you did,
Mhm.
I try not to use it just because people will often think that means we need to be aggressive.
Yeah.
And I've even had people brag to me, literally bragging to me, that their dog is afraid of them, and
Ah.
that makes absolute no sense to me. Also, when we think about the term submissive,
Mhm.
well, if a dog is being submissive, a lot of times their internal dialogue might be, "Look how small I am, please don't hurt me."
Right.
Why would we want our dogs to feel that way? I want my dog to be confident. And when we were talking about relationship building as well, my all-time best dog is the one you see behind me,
Mhm.
Ari, and I got her after I'd lost my other Malinois, so she
Mhm.
helped, like, with the healing process, and I played with her all the time. I took her to the playground, I took her out and did every single type of exercise that I could, but the play was so much part of what I was doing, and a lot of it was to help heal me,
Mhm.
but as a byproduct, the relationship that I have with her is far superior than any relationship that I've ever had
Mhm.
with any other dog. There's something else that you talk about, and I want to get a little bit more of your insight into this term because the first time I heard it was from you. You've popularized the idea of the binary dog.
Mhm.
What does that mean? And how can a simple yes no communication system improve an average owner's training effectiveness?
So everything I do goes back to simplicity. I'm a nuts and bolts kind of guy. I'm not a science guy. I'm not well read. I'm not that guy. My wife is like super, super intelligent. She comes from very, good lines, like you would say. I'm the guy who's just like, backyard bred. Um, to me, it has to be simple. And if you think of a game like Marco Polo or, Hot and Cold, Those are things that we can really simply communicate with a child, right? And if we think about a dog as being a child, which I look at them very much like that, not in the equation like, wow, would you put an e-collar on your child? No, but that's an idiotic argument, right? If you're going to bring that argument up, we can't even discuss things. But
Mhm.
hot and cold, black and white, yes and no are binary approaches. There's not anything else. In other words, I want you to do something, and you're either doing it or you're not doing it. And if I can kind of keep shaping you into it, you're going to get it. But if I say, people say you should be able. Well, there's two sides to it. One is people always say, "Oh, the dog only understands this word, this word, this word." That's kind of true. When I got this puppy, my friend Danny Craig, who's bred Malinois for a long time and is like a real good human being, said, "You want to be able to communicate your dog in full sentences." And I never thought about it as much as the moment he said it to me and the way I talked to this dog. Now, Goofy and I had the most amazing relationship. I mean, he was a once in a lifetime dog. But I also have a great relationship with this puppy because it's about, I can communicate with him in sentences because there's a meaning. But to start out with, I keep it real simple. He doesn't speak the language that I'm speaking. So how do I get him to understand that language? I got to start out real basic. When he's doing the right thing, I throw a party. Words don't matter. I can say yes, I can say banana. If he's doing something wrong, in the beginning too, I don't really use, it is a binary approach, but I don't really like to use the word no because I always save that word. I kind of go, nope, 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 because it's a little softer. I'm not the guy who said, there's a lot of purely positive people have kind of bastardized the whole communication thing where they say, you should never say no to a dog. Well, it doesn't matter if you use the word no or, you know, apple, because apple, if I say apple, he's going to go, oh, okay. So now apple has taken the negative connotation. You can't tell me you can't have any negative influences because a battery has a positive and negative pole. The earth has a north and a south pole. Without opposites, nothing works. Everything is lopsided, right? So the words in the beginning are very binary. Yes, no, good, not good. You're doing it, you're not doing it. That approach ping pongs the dog into really understanding. And my goal with a dog early on is to get to as many yeses, as many Pez dispensing treats, as many praises, as many bites on the tug as I possibly can, but I have to help the dog learn how to get there. We don't appreciate anything that we haven't earned. Things that are just given to us are not as appreciated as things that we've really worked hard to achieve. And if I can make the dog think that he sat when I told him to sit and he did it perfectly, and that was the greatest thing in the world. It's just like all the fireworks are going off. We're having a parade for that sit. He's going to try to do it again. Where if I just give him that cookie and go, good, that it's horrible. It's horrible for the dog. Or I push his butt down, sit, and he's sitting. Okay, good. Now sit. He doesn't know sit. He knows you forced him into a position that he didn't want to do, and you're not even making a good thing about it. Your praise is horrible. So it goes from that binary, simple ping pong approach into these removal of emotion. Like when my dog does something wrong, like I was talking to you before we started filming, like if my dog goes for the sleeve that's laying on the floor and I don't want him to go for it, I just go, yeah, we're not doing that. And I say, let it go, done, put it down. And I lay him down in front of him. I go, now just lay there with zero emotion. And the dog is like, what's going on? Because if I yell at him, it's an interaction, right? If I go, don't do that, don't you do that. Well, he still got the interaction. And what's the difference between don't do that, I don't want you to do that, to yeah, you did it, good job? Still energy, right? If you looked at an oscilloscope of the waves of energy, the peaks would still be high. And for the dog, he may be okay with that. Like my dog is okay with that. But what he's not okay with is the removal. Like there's nothing now. We've taken all that away. And that is something that you can get to. Again, it's still binary. It's either on or off. And think about it. We're talking through microphones on a computer that's going over the internet, and everything we're doing is a 1 and a 0. It's a complete binary approach. So the most complicated things in the world, sending a man to the moon, is based on a computer, which is a set of ones and zeros, a binary approach. So if we can do it to create all that, why can't we use it to train a dog?
And our dictionary definition of words too, I think often throws people off.
Mm-hmm.
How you were saying that people will, and I've heard this countless times, seen it in articles, seen it in videos. People are telling other people not to use the word no. Don't
Mm-hmm.
tell your dog no. And you said, well, you could say the word apple. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, well, yeah, our dogs don't have a dictionary. They
Right.
can't hear us say a word and then flip through their dictionary and go, oh, that's what that means.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. No, our words mean what they predict. And when we do it enough times, dogs start to learn and recognize that pattern. I used to use the word wrong
Mm-hmm.
as my marker for negative reinforcement. This is when I would implement what I call a teachable moment, very
Mm-hmm.
similar to what you were doing there, which often incorporates me showing the dog the preferred behavior in that moment, usually using negative reinforcement after I already taught the dog how to comply to negative reinforcement. So we already went through those stages of training to develop that communication
Mm-hmm.
system. And a part of that often is negative punishment,
Mm-hmm.
where the dog now isn't getting what it is that they want to have. And so I used to use the word wrong. Dog would break a stay. I would say wrong. What do I want the dog to do? I want them to go back to the stay. And I would have them do that. There would be no punishment. So wrong was more of a signal to go back to the previous position. But what I noticed is people took the word literally and they would
Mm-hmm.
say things like, dog is wrong. It's like, well, yeah, the dog's technically making a mistake, but they're really not wrong because they are allowed off the bed.
Mm-hmm.
They're just not allowed off the bed right now because I'm working a stay. But they don't even understand that they're working a stay yet. So I have to make it clear when you're on the platform, there's praise in the very beginning. I do what I call musical chairs.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm using a climb stay or any sort of stay in the very beginning, I do lots of praise when they're on the platform. The moment they step off, now I use instead of wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes more sense to people. And one of the common mistakes people would make with the word wrong is they would tell their dog, let's say down. The dog wouldn't go into the down. They would tell the dog wrong. And then they would make the dog go into the down with the leash. And what they were doing was they were teaching the dog that the command was down wrong because
Right.
it was down wrong signal, down, wrong signal.
Yeah.
And just by switching it to it's way more clear. Same thing with the word free. I used
Mm-hmm.
to use free as my terminal or termination marker,
Mm-hmm.
release plus reward. And I would have lessons and then I would go back for a follow up and their dog might be in a stay and they say free and the dog like takes off in the yard to go do something else. I'm like, what's going on there? I thought that was a terminal marker and they're like, no, free means free.
Right.
So basically I'm just trying to add to the point that you were making is that we could say whatever words that I
Mm-hmm.
could say apple. If I say apple and I correct the dog, then apple means a correction.
Right.
But the approach that you were saying, it also sounds like it's giving the dog the opportunity to learn the rules of the game before you start to add consequences. Is
Yeah.
there a period where you know when to add consequences that are going to be perhaps different from that, or that's good enough for that dog? Negative punishment is all he needs.
Well, to me, I don't believe in correcting a dog, with the exception of aggression or something like that. Okay, that's kind of a thing that I think in nature, I do tend to shut that down real quickly, and I've had extreme success doing it. So I don't believe when people say, "Oh, it causes fallout." I've never had a dog that I've dealt with that had aggression issues in the way I've dealt with that and had negative fallout. So what I focus on is behaviors. In other words, I ask you to sit, you don't sit, you blow me off, you give me the middle finger. I'm not going to punish you for that, right? I'm going to correct you for that. And the correction is, let's readdress it. Let's look at it again. And if you get the dog to do something, or you're luring the dog or trying to shape the dog into a sit, whatever, and the dog doesn't do it, either you've taught it wrong because it's not complicated, right? Or it's not valuable enough for the dog. So making it a punishable moment doesn't make it more teachable, doesn't make you a better teacher, and it certainly doesn't make it more valuable. And if you know that people always say, oh, I want my dog to go into a really fast down, or I want him to really heel nicely. Well, most people who are trying to do that will then put pressure into that picture. and a pop on the leash on the pop on the prong collar to get the dog to look up into a heel. Yeah, but that doesn't make a good looking heel. Now you've got a dog that's looking up because they're afraid of what's coming. Instead, motivate the dog to do it, show him what to do, motivate him to do it, and then reward him for doing it. The idea of punishment into things or negatives into obedience tends to stifle the dog, and it makes it much harder for the dog to learn that. We talked about that again before the podcast. We can really get into that. Correcting the dog if they don't know what they should be doing is improper. It just doesn't work for the dog. It just makes learning harder for the dog, and that's something I think we really should talk about, because how do creatures learn? Well, you certainly don't learn through stress, right? We know that. And that's something that is really coming, is one of the things that I think is really good that we're talking about in dog training, is how do creatures, especially warm-blooded creatures, which we look at like people or dogs or whatever, how do they learn? Stress can block things. I mean, it's a good methodology to block a dog hypothetically running in the street. Okay, I put them on a prong collar and e-collar. They go to run in the street. I block that. Great. Rattlesnake avoidance training. Those are times we definitely need to have a strong punishment that will motivate them not to do it. But you're on the other side, let's look at, we're going to teach a dog a recall. How many people use an e-collar to teach a recall, and the dog just is like, I'm not going near that guy. He's got the button. He keeps pushing it. Every time I'm there, I see him doing this and it hurts. Well, I had a client in Malibu, and the dog would run all the way across like the Malibu colony, and like a mile, to get away, because this trainer had tried to teach the dog how to recall with an e-collar by putting pressure on the e-collar. And I thought, that's the most idiotic thing I've ever seen in my life. It took me a couple of weeks to get the dog to understand that the e-collar would be a good thing and teach the dog the recall. So stress is a tricky beast that we often introduce into training, and it screws up our dogs.
And it is becoming more relevant in modern conversations with dog training. Back during the time of, Skinner or Pavlov, their research was more so about what they could measure. And since they really couldn't measure the dog's emotional state, that wasn't a main focus of the studies. But now we're starting to realize more and more how these different emotions, just like you said, has an impact whether or not the dog is learning. If I have a dog that is very fearful because I'm an aggressive handler, heavy handed, now the dog is focused on the threat and maintaining survival and no longer focused on trying to learn. I think it's the same with people. If you have a young kid who's going to school for the first time, and let's say it's an abusive teacher, and the child's afraid of the threat from the teacher, or perhaps maybe there's things going on at home that the child is having to focus on, they're not able to focus on what they're supposed to be learning.
Right.
And it's one of the things that I do with new dogs when I would do a stay and train. I haven't done a stay and train in a while. Mostly I do lessons in person or online now. But when I did stay and trains, I set up what I called the adjustment period. Now, I didn't charge for it. I could have probably at least charged boarding, but I also didn't want people to think that I was taking advantage of them and I was trying to take their money. And so the adjustment period was when I was just getting the dog comfortable in the environment. And I had a lot of dogs that were very fearful, or they had extreme issues of aggression. And often the aggression was a byproduct of improper training. There's a dog that I've mentioned a few times on my podcast, Frankie. If you Google search Frankie Inside Edition, they called it a demon dog, a devil dog. I don't like to say devil dog. That's what they said, but people also like devil dog for a Marine.
Right.
But they called it a demon dog, very aggressive. And I ended up working with that dog for about 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. And I had zero issues with aggression because all the communication was very clear and I was never aggressive to the dog. So the dog wasn't reflecting that back on me. And this adjustment period once the dog became comfortable with me and they started to trust me, that's when I would start training. And whatever I had to do to get the dog to trust me. If I
Mhm.
felt comfortable sitting on the floor with them and just hanging out, or just being in the room with them, maybe tossing them treats, walking around, whatever I had to do to get the dog comfortable, that adjustment period became pivotal to my training system, because I noticed when I didn't do it for the dogs that needed it, the training ended up taking longer because
Mhm.
I was starting when the dog wasn't in the right emotional state. And they associated training with that negative feeling that I developed from the very beginning from working with them when they were at that negative emotional state. How much do you focus on teaching people to understand a dog's emotions as well as our own emotions, as they can often reflect on the dog?
Well, first of all, I'm gonna tell you that what you said there m m changes my mind about, board and training, because I think board and training is, for the most part, and a lot of people hate me for saying this, but it's a waste of money, right? Because I can get the dog to do something, but you can't, because a lot of trainers, not good trainers, but just, the average trainers, don't focus on that. They don't focus on getting the dog into a learning mindset and getting them relaxed to understand this is their life. I mean, the dog gets in their boarding facility, they're in a kennel, they get out 3 times a day for 15 minutes, they get, fed and they get a walk, and that's it. So what you're saying there is really kudos to you for actually taking the time to do that, because so many people don't. And kudos to you for talking about it, because I'm hoping that young trainers will listen to you and this podcast and say, there is a better way. There is something I can take away from this. And if listen to this podcast, or if you go to a seminar or whatever, if you learned 10 things, you wasted your money. But if you learned one thing, it was worthwhile, because one thing you'll take away. And like that one thing that you just said, I think is so powerful for anybody who does board and trains or stay and trains, like you call them, to give that dog a fair chance. So then, to answer your question, piggybacking on it, is you have to understand, or strive to understand, why your dog is doing things. Now, there's two sides to this with me. A predominant portion, a very high portion of my work, and an overwhelming portion of my passion, is shelter dogs. Well, when you have a shelter dog, you know nothing about that dog. The dog is literally in a kennel. You don't even know his name, right? He could have been picked up as a stray. He could have been tied to the post in the front. He could have been confiscated as evidence. So when you walk up to that kennel door, you're taking and a lot of times dogs don't show aggression. They'll just look at you kind of stiff and kind of looking at you, and okay, then you're going to get bit. You don't know anything about that dog. And so you have to build, first of all, you have to protect yourself, because if you're injured, you're useless to the rest of the dogs. And that's really important. So I always say to people I'm teaching, protect yourself first and foremost, because if you get injured, a lot of dogs will suffer. Second of all, that dog has to figure out, what do you want from me, and are you trying to hurt me? Because they're in fight or flight mode. They're in prison. And when you're in prison, you're going to either be somebody's pack of cigarettes, or you're going to be, the other guy. You want to make sure that the dog understands that you have his best interest at heart. And a lot of times for that, I use a very completely non-emotional approach. I don't even want to really talk to the dog. A lot of times I'll get a dog in a yard, I'll put a slip lead on him, and I'll just let him run around and just watch them and just observe them. What's their body posture like? What are they sniffing neurotically? Are they loose in their body? Are they tense in their body? Are they looking over their shoulders constantly? Are they fluid? Are they relaxed? Those are things we need to figure out with some dogs. But when you have a client who has a dog, I mean, it's a gimme. If you, as long as you can get that client to be honest, because clients sometimes aren't honest. They don't, not necessarily intentionally, but they might just not know what they've been screwing up on. They're too
Mhm.
hard on the puppy, or too soft on the pushy dog, or or they're not taking a really balanced approach. They're just letting the dog walk all over them. And this is the problem in our industry, and it's something we need to remedy. Is it's not all corrections and punishment, or all purely positive. Neither of those two sides will ever lead to a happy dog. It's in the middle. I hate the word balance training. I've tried to kind of eliminate that from my vocabulary because it just assumes like, oh, well, I'm a balance trainer. Well, okay, so now I'm an imbalance trainer. It's just, I get where the terminology comes from, but when people say, "What kind of trainer?" Yes, I'm a dog trainer. Well, are you a positive dog trainer? I said, I'm a dog trainer. I mean, I just train dogs. I don't really understand balance, positive, this or that. So getting to the root of your dog's behavior, I don't like to call it a problem because it's usually not a problem for the dog. The dog is probably pretty happy chasing the other dog or chasing the squirrels. Um, People are incapable of seeing their errors and how it affects the dog. A really quick story. There was a client I had, and very well-known person. I won't mention his name, but he had a dog that he rescued, and the woman who ran the rescue sent me up to the house, and I said, "What's the problem? The dog's trying to kill the cats." Great, that's not a hard thing to fix, right? So what? And it was like a nice dog. It was like a Labrador, golden retriever. It wasn't like a real predatory dog. So I got to the house, a golden retriever. Now that I remember it, and the guy was outside, and I was outside, and I said, "Where's the dog?" He said, "Oh, he's over there." And this dog was running the fence line chasing squirrels. And I said, "Why is the dog chasing squirrels?" He goes, "Well, he likes doing that." And I said, "Just curiously, what's the issue with the dog?" He said, "He's trying to kill my cats." And I said, can you in any way understand that the dog might be seeing cats as big squirrels?" And he said, "No." And I said, "So you don't think in any way, shape, or form, this dog chasing these animals that have fur and a tail and them running away resembles him chasing your cat, which has fur and a tail, and it runs away?" And it really, he couldn't see that. He really couldn't see it. So before I ever took the dog in the house, I put the dog on a long down, just a down with a line in front of the squirrels. And I said, "No, you can't chase the squirrels." And, we corrected them, showed them, "Okay, when you stay there, I'm going to bring you a cookie. I'm going to pet you. I'm going to go away from you." And then when we took him in the house, it was, like an hour for the dog to start to understand that, "Oh, okay, you're asking me to lay down. I got to lay down." But people, even with all the information that's out there now, and maybe it's the fault of all the information because there's so much information out there now, it's overwhelming. I wouldn't want to start training my dog with online information now because there's so much and you don't know what's good. Like really bad information is packaged in really good covers now, or really good websites, or really good looking courses, but it's really horrible information. So we need to get people to understand the simple thing, which is what we talked about early in our interview. The basic understanding of the dog, the basic needs of the dog, and to be able to read the dog. That would really help people better understand things like, what is body language? Why isn't a dog doing X, Y, and Z? And I had this thing in the course I taught that showed body language. Well, the problem is, just because a dog is wagging their tail doesn't mean they're happy, right? And just because they're really stiff doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be aggressive. We need to be able to look at the whole dog, and that's what Lewis and I used to always talk about. And he could do it. He was a master. He and I would walk down one of the busiest shelters in LA, and we developed the first play group program for the city of Los Angeles. And he would walk down the aisles and he'd say, "Okay, this dog here, skip this one. These two over here, and these two, they'll be fine in the yard." And he was never wrong. He was never wrong. He didn't do complicated behavior assessments or temperament tests and everything. He would do it. And if there's a problem, we corrected it. And I have a close to a 10-year history with the city of Los Angeles. I had never, in the entire 10 years, and thousands of dogs, there was never an injury that required any veterinary care or injury to a person, because we would read dogs. And we were iron fisted about making sure that people would follow those rules and listen to, this is what this dog is telling you. He's telling it to you without words. And if you can't see it, you need to step back and learn how to read that first and foremost.
You brought up some really good points there, especially with the body language of the dogs. I always felt like reading a dog's body language should come naturally for humans, considering we've evolved with them for the past however many years,
Right.
40,000, depending on the literature that you're reading. When you study body language or canine body language, it often points out little things like, oh, look at the tail, look at the ears here. But as you said, it's really much the big picture.
Mhm.
And I think just paying attention to dogs and looking at what they're doing, how you said, observe the dog run around, see what the body language is telling you. How comfortable does the dog feel? I think that does come natural if we pay attention to it. But I think some people don't take the time, or maybe it's not something that's natural. And
Well,
the other thing that stood out was the example with the squirrel,
mhm,
because that sounds like it's also becoming an intrinsic motivator or an internal motivation
mhm,
where the dog is getting this feeling of satisfaction for chasing the squirrel. It feels good.
mhm.
Where can I replicate that feel good sensation inside the house? Perfect. The cats.
Right.
And it's mind blowing that that wasn't something that the owner was able to recognize. And then one more thing, because I know you have something you want to say.
Mhm.
We often do things that we don't realize we're doing, or we think we're doing things that we're not doing. And one of the best ways to combat that, what I tell all new students to do, is to film yourself working with your dog.
Yeah.
I'm a true believer that champions study game footage. And even to this day, when I'm recording an episode or I'm working with a dog and I set the tripod up and I'm filming myself, I can almost always pinpoint mistakes that I'm making.
Mhm.
And in one of my videos, I even said it in the comments. I said, I made a mistake. Can anyone point it out? And I haven't checked it, so I don't know if anyone's pointed it out. But those were a few things that popped in my mind as
Mhm.
you were talking.
Yeah, you said something that's really interesting, and I always give this analogy to people. Yeah, we've evolved over thousands and thousands of years, right? And in fact, my wife and I were talking about it yesterday on our walk, and we've evolved by pure, blood, sweat, and tears, right? We're not getting eaten by lions. We're not getting, whatever. But think about this, and this is a really important thing. The death of society, everybody who walks around, they're on their phone, right? They have the hump in the back of their head because they're on their phone like this the whole time, and they're not paying attention to their dogs. They're reading Facebook, they're reading, Instagram, and they're not reading dogs. They're not reading people. People are getting hit by cars. People are getting mugged because they're not paying attention. They're not walking. You're a martial artist. You've taught self-defense. One of the first things we always, as martial artists, when we teach self-defense, is to walk straight, walk with confidence, and keep your eyes open. You're not a victim, right? A predator is always looking for a victim. A predator lion never chases the fastest zebra. Never. They chase the zebra that wasn't paying attention, the baby, the old one, or the one that was, on their phone looking at Facebook. So that's the same thing. So people have think about this. I know you've been in this game for just about as long as me, maybe a little bit shorter, but think about the videos that we used to put out. If I put out a 30-minute video on YouTube, it's not going to get any views, right? If I put out a 20-second reel, I know I'm going to get 100,000 views on those reels. People's attention span is gone. We've really developed into a society, as opposed to books getting longer and thicker and deeper and more involved. We're looking now at writing a book on a matchbook cover. That's the
Mhm.
society we're facing, and that's really hard, because when we talked about tracking, and you talk about Tom Rose doing 200, he has 200 acres. He's tracking everywhere, every single day. I go to, I'm not going to say where I go because somebody's going to take my spot for tracking. Like, once you find good tracking, never share it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm there all the time, and I'm doing these long tracks, and he's making mistakes, but he's learning. But I'm watching, and I'm dedicated, and I'm pushing, and I'm doing that. Then I go take a break for 20 minutes, and we go do our obedience, our healing, our retrieves, our fronts, our positions, our everything. That is gone. We're really looking now at a 30-second Instagram reel with music of a Malinois doing something really crazy, right? It's either bite work, jumping through fire, jumping through a window, or the stupid thing that I hate is the Malinois, the jumping thing that they do now, where they have them
Mhm.
running up the side of a building and then they catch him, and the guy's stoned and he doesn't catch his dog and it breaks his back. I hate anything that puts dogs at risk. I don't like it at all. I mean, and I think a lot of times, even with some of the sports, we put our dogs at risk. We need to protect our dogs. And, you know, their life is all they have. We can get another dog. They can't get another life. So we have an immense responsibility for them, that if we're going to do sports with them, and I'm a big fan of the sports, IGP particularly, and agility now with Shmoo, I am very, very uh, fastidious about making sure that everything is safe for him.
I always say safety is priority number one. And not to get too much into the weeds, but what you were saying as far as the Instagram reels or the YouTube shorts,
Mm-hmm.
I've been very much, I don't want to say against, but it's been difficult for me to want to post these shorts because I often feel like the information that someone needs to understand a specific technique
Mm-hmm.
can't be placed in a 1 to 3 minute video. But besides that, there's this excellent book that I read around November of last year, and the title was Dopamine Detox, or not Dopamine Detox, I'm sorry, Dopamine Nation.
Mm-hmm.
And the book essentially is about, with all this modern technology, people are not sitting in boredom. And there's a certain way in which the brain operates when we're bored.
Hmm.
And it makes us think about things, and it could actually make things more clear as far as what you need to do, or something that you want to do with your business, or certain goals or certain ambitions that you might have.
Mm-hmm.
But we always go to the phone to cure that feeling of boredom.
Mm-hmm.
And the pain and pleasure in the brain is connected. So the more we push on the pleasure side through cheap forms of dopamine, not
Mm-hmm.
dopamine in general, and I'm not saying this as an expert because I'm certainly not, but if we're taking in cheap forms of dopamine through things like alcohol, drugs, pornography, video games, even something like movies, perhaps, that we're pushing on this pleasure or this pleasure side. And then, in order for the brain to balance itself back out, it pushes on the pain. And this comes out as forms of stress and
Mm-hmm.
anxiety and depression.
Mm-hmm.
And when we take all these things away, which I'm starting a new dopamine detox, if that's what we want to call it now, because I don't, fell off the wagon of the dopamine detox from December last year up until about 2 months ago. I wasn't consuming any movies, no alcohol, no video games, nothing. I was more productive.
Mm-hmm.
My brain felt significantly more clear. I didn't have those foggy moments.
Wow.
Boredom no longer bothered me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to accomplish things with absolute ease because I took out all those distractions.
I love
And I said,
that.
I don't want to get too much into the weeds because I do want to get back to the puppy training. If you have anything you want to add to that, please do.
No.
I do want to ask this next question. Okay, perfect. So when someone brings home an 8-week-old puppy, what are the first things, and it doesn't have to be an 8-week-old puppy, but a
Mm-hmm.
puppy, what are the very first things you would recommend that they do in terms of training or routine? For example, establishing a feeding routine, management, the puppy's name, crate introduction, etc.
Well, it's such a vast thing to look at, right? It's almost completely overwhelming. It's like, I think, I mean, and I have no children, but I would equate, if I was a woman and I brought a baby home for the first day, my God, what do you do? You know, and the first thing I always tell people, and this will lead us into a whole bunch of other things, I'm just going to throw it out there, is just take a chill pill, right? You're going to screw up. You're gonna screw up. I screw up. You screw up. The best
Mm,
trainers in the world, whether it's competitive things or whatever, we all make mistakes, and mistakes are not permanent. Mistakes are a path towards learning. So the first thing I always tell people is just relax. You've got to work this puppy into your life, not work your life around this puppy. So that's really important. And the thing with a puppy, when they first come to your home, just take a chill pill. Like, he doesn't need to know how to sit, stand down, recall, spin around, and these things day one. He doesn't even need to know any of those things month one. And so many times I'll get a message or a comment, and they'll say something like, my dog's 12 weeks old. He knows how to sit. He knows how to down. He knows how to stand. He can heel for a little bit, but he loses his attention. And I think, well, you've bombarded him with way too much stuff. Like my puppy couldn't do any for 6 months, couldn't do anything. I have a good friend, I'm not going to say his name, but he's an amazing, one of the best trainers in the world, has won the world championships in IGP. And he said, I have a 2.5-year-old dog, and my dog doesn't know how to, do secondary obedience yet. He can't heel in protection. And I thought, I love this guy. Like he is not putting that pressure on the dog to do something he's not ready to do. We're here in California, especially, a lot of people who are doing bite sports. If the dog doesn't get it, they're going to do it through pressure, right? And that's not a way to learn, in my opinion. And I'm not going to get into arguments and calling people names, but it's my dog, it's my way. So when the puppy comes in, I like the puppy to be relaxed. I want the puppy to feel like in this home, this is the greatest place to be. There's no stress. Now, we've used the word stress a lot, and I kind of want to piggyback on something, because stress is the greatest driving factor for growth, right? When we lift weights, we put stress on our muscles, we tear the muscles down, and we rebuild them, we get stronger and bigger. Martial arts, we learn through stress by being somebody putting me in this armbar because I slipped this way. I learn how to get out of the armbar. I'll never learn that by reading a book. So stress is a good thing, but for a young dog, stress needs to be managed and mitigated for the dog to grow from it. I don't want the dog to feel an imminent amount of responsibility or stress when they first show up. Let them be relaxed. Now, it's just the opposite of what people would think. I manage stress by limiting exposure to things. I don't manage stress by saying, "Oh, go check out the whole house. Check it out. This is your house." Uh-uh. My puppy comes in the house, they immediately go in a crate. And that crate is their window to the world. Nothing bad can happen in that crate. I put a bunch of treats in there. I've got chew toys in there. The puppy comes in. When I brought Shmuley home, I took him for a walk. I picked him up. I brought him in the house. My dog, Goofy, he was 13 at the time, my Malinois, my 12-year-old working line German Shepherd, our 12-year-old Labrador, and our 7-year-old Labrador, 5-year-old, he was at that point. We were all there. I picked him up. Everybody came in. I could trust my dogs. They sniffed him. I said, good. I let him go potty. I picked him up. I put him in a crate. That's it. He was sitting in the crate, and every dog walked around him. He looked at everybody. Nobody stepped on him. Nobody growled at him. Nobody snapped at him. He didn't pee in the house. He didn't get into an electrical cord. He had the most amazing seat for the show that he could have possibly. He was center stage, center row, first row, watching everything. And that's powerful for the puppy, right? Nothing's happening bad. He's looking around. He can scream. He can do whatever. That's it. And from there, everything happens early on with my puppy. It's all good. It's hand feeding. It's luring. It's taking him out. Sometimes what I'll do with a puppy early on, I take him out of the crate and I carry him, put him right on the grass. There's not even a chance for you to make a mistake. And my puppy he had one accident after the fire. He was stressed out. He peed on a dog bed that the hotel gave us, and obviously had some other dog smell on it, but never had an accident in the house. Never. Because I want to take that away, because that's stressful for the dogs. I'm going to get upset, and just my energy level getting upset is going to upset the puppy. So whenever, it's an old methodology, but I still believe in it, that if your dog pees in the house, that you should take a newspaper and roll it up very, very tight. And I usually like to put duct tape around it so it hurts more, and bash yourself in the head with it, and hit yourself in the head at least 3 or 4 times because you screwed something up. If you can't figure out how to get a little puppy that you can pick up from the crate to the grass, the newspaper should be rolled up really tight and just beat yourself in the head with it, across the face with it, because you screwed that up, not the puppy.
And dogs are very much creatures of habit.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody has a dog, let's say they get the dog in New York, and when they walk the dog, they're always on concrete, and the dog goes potty on the sidewalk, just whatever's available. Then they move to the country and they realize the dog's having a hard time going potty because it doesn't want to go potty in the grass.
Mm-hmm.
It's used to going potty on the street or the sidewalk.
Yeah.
And it works the other way as well.
Mm-hmm.
If your dog is always going potty in the grass, then they don't even think about going potty on the hardwood floor or the carpet. But this is a common issue, and a lot of people do run into potty training issues. And I want to ask what your strategies are for somebody who's had a dog that is already having accidents inside the house. But before you explain that process, there is an analogy that I like to tell my clients and students that are dealing with potty training or if they're teaching it. And it's the idea of people, and I love that you did that newspaper one because I was curious where you're going with it. Another one of the old school techniques is to rub the dog's face in it.
Mhm.
And I say, it's not that the dog doesn't remember going potty. It's just that the dog's not connecting the punishment with the behavior,
Mhm.
especially if it's happened 10, 15, 20 minutes after the fact. And this was the best analogy that I can come up with. I'm curious to hear your opinion on it. I say, imagine you're a prisoner of war and you're in a country where you don't speak the language and you have your little prison cell and there's some guards that are always right outside the prison cell and you have a toilet inside the cell and you use this toilet every day, no problem. One day you get bored and you took something from the chow hall or the cafeteria and you're carving on the wall. The guards see you carving on the wall. They start yelling at you in a language you don't understand. They run in, they grab you, and they shove your face in the toilet. Are you going to think they're shoving your face into the toilet because you use the toilet? Or are you going to think they're shoving your face in the toilet as a punishment for carving on the wall? And of course, for carving on the wall, that's what you're going to connect it to.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's, I believe, with the dog. If the
Mhm.
dog's doing something, human comes in, sees dog, dog's happy to see the human.
Mhm.
Hey, human's home. Human sees the mess, starts yelling at the dog. Dog goes, don't be happy when the human comes home.
Mhm.
Gee.
It's a great analogy because I was kind of wondering where you're going with that. I think it's really, really good. I thought you were going to say the chow hall, you put the food in the toilet or something like that. Um, I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with corrections. For example, if I have a puppy and a couple things, right? So, housebreaking a dog is relatively simple. The master is my wife. She's super patient. She's super chill with it. Um, but the patience element is something that we, with our egos, tend to lose, right? Like, oh, I told you not to do this. The first dog, the first Malinois I bought was from my friend Tasha, and she said, I don't trust a Malinois free in the house for the first 2 years. That's a great rule of thumb, and she's been breeding really nice Malinois for a long time. If I can confine the dog, now, okay, if I confine the dog too long, he's going to pee in the crate, and
Mm,
there is no punishment for that. I mean, what am I going to be mad at him? Like, I didn't let him out, right? So as long as I don't condition the dog to thinking he should pee in the crate, which can happen. Like a lot of times people will do that. They'll take the dog, they pee in the crate, they take him out, they clean the crate, they go and they go, well, he's not pottying. Okay, we'll put him back in the crate. And he gets back in the crate and he has to pee and he pees in a crate. So they will associate that. And I've had dogs that have had to counter condition from that, from bad crate training. But
mhm,
if you look at the idea, I mean, it's pretty simple for the dog to understand. I take you outside, you go potty. Wow, good potty. Boom. If I tell my dog to go potty, which when I'm doing agility classes, I say go potty, and he has to go potty before we run a course. Before I go tracking, I take my dog out, go potty, and he wants to go tracking. He sees the flag. Nope, we're on this side over here. You got to go potty. Before we do obedience, before we go on the field, you must go potty. I don't care if you have to go or not, but you have to lift your leg and squeeze something out. And that's the rule. And every one of my dogs I've always done that with. So we can build that association. Now, if I have a dog and they're messing in the house after, I know they're kind of okay with it, the first thing I always think about is, do they have a urinary tract infection? Because the dog could have something wrong
mhm,
with them. And there's a reason for that. I can't punish the dog because he's sick. It's like punishing a dog for throwing up. Like, it's the stupidest thing in the world. And it's the same thing. If they're sick, they can't hold the pee. So they're peeing in the house because they're sick. So you got to get them to a vet and get them taken care of. Just like if they throw up, you don't shove their face in it. That's idiotic. And only an idiot would do that. But if I have a dog that's marking in the house and he's doing it obstinately, and I have had dogs like that, clients' dogs, they would come in, they would look at them, and they'd look right at the person and just start pissing. okay, you're going to get corrected for that,
Mm.
and that's a different story. And this is where we have to be a more balanced um, person to say, okay, if the dog is going to do something, he knows he shouldn't be doing it, but he's doing it intentionally, he's doing it wrong, and there's nothing else that's upsetting the situation, we're going to want to correct that, or we're going to just have a dog who's going to pee all over our house and we're not going to fix it ever. So,
And I'm glad you brought up the UTI because
mhm,
I've had that on multiple occasions where a client was struggling and we broke down the process for potty training, but they were still having issues.
mhm,
And I would say, have you had the dog checked to make sure they don't have a UTI? And then hours later, I get a call. Yep, you were right. Dog had a UTI.
yep,
And something else you mentioned about the dog going potty inside of the crate, that is very important to make sure someone avoids in the beginning because if the dog ends up deciding, if we're considering motivation,
mhm,
behaviors are based on motivation.
mhm,
If the dog is more motivated to relieve themselves than they
mhm,
are motivated to avoid laying in their own feces,
yep,
then they're going to continue to do that, and that becomes something that could be very challenging to fix because the dog
very,
goes, "You know what? I don't mind laying in my own urine.
yep.
I'm just gonna relieve myself and take a nap." So, very important to set a schedule to be able to take them out, to have them go potty. What about management? Do you do a lot of management or help clients with management besides the crate? So things like puppy gates or play pens, or perhaps maybe having treats stashed in different areas throughout the house for a quick reward if needed?
I mean, I like the idea of, I taught a lot of clients to have treat pouches throughout the house. So you can always reward your dog. You can always mark the dog for good behaviors and as well as correct them for bad behaviors. I think so much of it is routines. I think dogs thrive on routines. I think that's something that's really overlooked. I thrive on routines. I have the same exact breakfast every single morning. If I don't have it, I'm like I lose my mind, right? I have my pillows a certain way on the bed. I have my desk, my pens a certain way on my desk. I love routines, which is why I love training dogs because I get dogs. I understand how they think, and I think they understand me. People, if you get a puppy or an older a dog or a new dog to your house, if you can spend time um, building that routine early on, the first few months, you're going to have a really great dog. But if you want to give that dog all this freedom, oh, I just got him from the shelter. He was abused. He was neglected. I want to give him a lot of freedom and show him that he's going to be loved. You will destroy the dog. The dog, it doesn't matter how bad of conditions he came from. It could have come from the worst hoarding situation in the world. If you teach him a routine, that routine will be his safety net, much more so than giving him all that freedom, which is going to scare the heck out of him. Dogs are fearful when they're not understanding things because they have to figure things out. And if you want the dog to feel safe in your house, show them the routine, show them what you're expecting him to do, what you want him to do. And when they do it, make them feel good about it and they're going to repeat it, but that's,
That,
yeah, good.
sorry, and I was gonna say that goes back to learning theory.
Right.
It's a book I mentioned the other day, and it's worth mentioning again. It's titled Remember, and it's written by a neuroscientist. And she talks about certain things that could affect learning and affect your ability to remember.
Mm-hmm.
And one is not having a sense of control, not having a sense of predictability, not having a sense of belonging. And as I read it, I took a photo of it and I have it on my phone because it fits so well into dog training. Those exact same principles for humans being in the right environment to learn
Yeah.
also applies to our dogs. The term imprinting gets mentioned quite a lot in puppy training. How would you define imprinting in the context of raising a puppy, and why are the first 16 weeks so pivotal in a dog's development?
Imprinting, I always try to get away from really scientific terms because I think we lose so many people. And the more scientific we get with things, the more it kind of start to, people go, I can't get it. I can't do that. I'm just going to let my dog have a happy life. So I'm the like anti-science guy. Although I love science, like I'm a big fan of science, I take it out of the equation because as a nuts and bolts kind of thinker. Like I can see, okay, this is a nut, this is a bolt. I screw it. I'm like a gorilla. I get that part. So imprinting, I always equate it to this. You take a piece of clay and you put your pinky on it, and you have now an imprint of a fingerprint. That will stay there until I come along with my thumb and push on it a little bit harder. Now the pinky imprint is down below where I can't see it, but my thumb imprint is there. So I always want to make the action that I want the dog to do, or the memory that I want my dog to receive, um, to be stronger than what he had previously, more beneficial for him. So I imprint, if you want to call it that word, a lot of things. Like I imprint my dog when he's near me. There's abundant praise that goes on. I try, and it happens. We all correct our dogs, and I said this to somebody once in a interview. I said, we've all corrected our dogs too hard. And
Mhm.
if we, what I hate is when people say, "Oh, that's abusive." We all do it. My mom spanked me. She didn't really want to, maybe, or something, whatever. It doesn't matter. I I've been too hard on maybe all of my dogs at one point or another, but it made me a better trainer and parent to that dog because I realized it. And when I was hard on them, I was hard on them in order to protect them. It was something that they were going to do. It wasn't like, "Oh, you're taking a treat too hard." No, it's not that. It's you're being aggressive, and that aggression, if it's not quelled or managed early on, it's going to get worse. And I have worked in shelters for a long time, and I don't ever want my dog to end up in the shelter. I'd rather somebody saying you're being too hard on your dog than for somebody saying you're too soft on your dog's aggressive. Um, the imprint should be the benefit to the dog. So for me, my dog receives abundant praise when he's near me. Now he'll run up to me and put his paws on me, and he's a very powerful dog, and jump and push me. And sometimes he'll come from the back, and he's tweaked my back doing it, but I'll never get him in trouble for doing that. I'd rather, even in a competitive notion or competition, see a dog that runs up in a recall and knocks the person over than a dog who stops 3 feet away. Because a dog who stops 3 feet away has been pressured into doing that. There's no dog in the world that will ever stop 3 feet in front of its owner, unless the owner was, very, very hard, pressured him to come or pressured him to sit. The dog that's bolting into you and knocking you over is so happy to be with you, and that dog is less likely to run away from you, run in the street, or chase a dog, because he sees the game and the love is with you. So that's a huge imprint I do for my dog. He must understand that being near me, and even if he runs up to me or something, that's totally chill, totally cool. I love that. Um, and if a dog does something wrong and catches himself and corrects himself, that's a huge piece for me. And I teach my dogs that, like, okay, I tell you to down and you sit, and then he goes, "Oh, shoot, I meant down." Okay. And he goes into a down. I'm going to throw a party for him for that, right? Like, you figured it out. You learned that. And the way the imprint phase, what we're talking about, is to make sure the dog knows that figuring things out, offering behaviors, is always rewarded. It's always a good thing for me that you're trying to do something. You're not just giving up. And dogs that give up are usually dogs that are pressured too much, because when we can't teach through pressure, and when we do try to teach through pressure, dogs don't know what to do. Then they just go, "Okay, I'm going to shut down, because everything I'm doing, I'm getting corrected for, and I'm getting pressured for. So I'm not going to do it." So, and that's why, going back to what we talked about earlier, the game thing is so much fun because it allows us to repeat things over and over again. Down. No, you didn't do it. Hey, miss, down. You did it. Boom, you get the bite on the tug. Now we play. Out. Miss, down. Boom, you get it. Yeah, another play session. So we start to imprint these things through fun. It's the way I taught karate to kids. I do short sessions, motivational sessions, fun, good energy. And those imprints last a lot longer than trying to explain it to a dog and trying to make it, studious or scientific.
And since we're talking about imprinting, one of the areas within dog training that's often confused, and people will mean well when they're attempting this portion of their training, but a lot of times they're creating issues. And the word I'm talking about is socializing.
Mm.
What are the right and proper ways to socialize a new puppy?
Man, I mean, if there's one thing in this interview that'll in my opinion, be the most important thing we're talking about, it's that. Socializing is the most important thing you will do for your dog. Forget about obedience, forget about anything in the world. If you can only do one thing for a dog, it's to socialize them. Now, improper socialization is a disaster. And most people don't understand what socializing means. A big uh, ideal that you'll see is, remember during COVID, all these people went and got all these dogs out of the shelters. They said, oh, we're going to be home. We're going to get these dogs out of the shelters. And then every single one of those people came to me when COVID was over, when the whole hype of it was over, and said, wow, my dog's really aggressive because I couldn't socialize him because it was COVID. And I said, well, it wasn't like the Black Plague. Like, people were out. I was out. I was socializing my dog, because people think socializing a dog means, one, it has to meet every person. Two, it has to meet every single dog. And those are the two things that are the worst thing to do to the dog. The dog, in my opinion, when I have a young puppy with Shmoo, for example, Shmoo has never met face to face or played with another dog. That's not in my pack, right? We had four dogs at the time. We had Goofy, Maya, Jimmy, Dwayne, and Shmoo. So he got to play with all those dogs. He got to socialize and interact with all those dogs. And public socialization for him meant, I see other dogs and I'm respectful. I see those dogs and I pay attention to my dad, and I get a cookie, or I get to play tug, or I get to keep walking. I don't ever have to meet those dogs, because the minute I start letting my dog meet random other dogs, my dog starts to think, well, all dogs are good. I get to meet other dogs. There's another dog. I have to go run over. And then when I can't let them meet that dog that time, he's going to start barking and lunging and pulling on the leash, and probably pulling that leash out of my hand and running across the street and getting hit by a car. Or it's another dog and I don't know them. How many people come up to me and say, can my dog say hi to your dog? I say, no, my dog doesn't say hi, because I don't know your dog. And for a young puppy to have a bad experience and get bit by another dog is the single most leading contributing factor to dog aggression reactivity thereafter. If a puppy has a bad experience and gets bit by another dog, 90% of those puppies are going to have reactivity or aggression issues to other dogs. If your dog never got bit by another dog, ever, and it's now like he is 18 months old, but he's seen countless other dogs on a walk. We see dogs every day. I take him to places where there's tons of dogs. And my dog will choose to do obedience with me, choose to do a focus heel with me when there's another dog circling around us. He's not going to go off because it's super fun to be with me. He's never met another dog. He doesn't even think it could possibly be fun. What could possibly be better than being with me? Right? That's what my dog thinks. I get to be with this great guy. He gives me treats. He plays with me. He pets me. He pays my food. He pays my rent. Pays my insurance. And he's the greatest guy in the world. Some scruffy other dog means nothing to him. Meeting other people is also a big mistake people make. Everybody gets to say hi to their dog. Well, if you have a dog that's a little mouthy or nippy, and then the dog goes and nips and tries to play with them or something, and then they scream and the dog has a bad experience for that, horrible. If my dog learns he can go say hi to every single person around, and he all of a sudden wants to go say hi to somebody, and that person is scared to death of dogs and starts running away from him, that's a weird thing for my dog. So early on, my puppies meet safe dogs. Usually it's my dog in my home, or I'll find somebody who I know has a safe dog and I let them meet that dog. People, I'm very fastidious about my dog meeting different people that I choose. And I mean, this is going to come across wrong, but if anybody listens to this, they'll understand this, especially a trainer. My dog has to meet different people. It has to meet men and women, Black people, Asian people, tall people, short people, children, everything, people in uniform, people in stores, all these different things. When I choose, I say, oh, can you say hi to my puppy? I got some treats in my pocket. I give them to him. I say, just open your hand and give him some treats. Boom. He met that person. That person's safe. Because how many times do you have people say, oh, dogs are racist. They don't like Black people. My dog loves black people. I mean, I've never had a dog in my life, a personal dog, that didn't like people of every color. Because I have friends who are black, who are Hispanic, who are tall, who are short, who are whatever. And my dog meets those people, so they think, well, these people, it's just normal. It's not nothing special. Dog doesn't, dogs are basically colorblind. They're seeing shades of colors. They're not seeing this guy's black, this guy's Indian, this guy's whatever. It's important that we socialize our dogs in a real structured way. We have to know what we're doing, and it has to be a game plan of how do we make this a good experience for the dog and one that's going to last, because those early imprint times, up until the dog is like 6 months old, they're critical. And what's really critical with a puppy, and a lot of people don't talk about this, is that 5 week window, that 5 to 7 week window where hopefully you're getting your dog from a good breeder, and hopefully that breeder has had little kids hold that puppy so that they can get that kid energy into them, and other people and these other sounds and stuff that the dog should be experiencing, being outside, not just being kept in a whelping box in some garage. So those are critical things for a dog, and managing it and making it successful can mean the difference between a really happy, well-balanced dog and a dog that's messed up for a long time, that once it's in there, you can manage it, but it's not as easy to handle as if it's properly, if they're properly socialized early on.
And I treat imprinting the same way with a few minor adjustments.
Mhm.
For example, I have certain people pet my puppies when I'm going through the imprinting stage, but I always do it at specific locations.
Mm.
And I usually use three. So at the house, at the veterinarian's office, and where I train martial arts.
Hmm.
Because I know the people in these locations and I could trust them that they're not going to make a mistake. I
Right.
like how you said you keep it simple though.
Hmm.
Here's a treat, you can hand it to the dog.
That's it.
I tell my clients and my students that a lot of it is really about exposure, getting your puppy out there,
Hmm.
getting your puppy within close proximity to lots of different things, but not always direct interaction.
Yeah.
And you hit the nail on the head where either A, the dog ends up getting frustrated when we decide to take it away because they learn to enjoy the experience of pulling the owner to another puppy or
Hmm.
another human, or B, maybe the dog doesn't like it
Right.
and they decide a good defense is a strong offense,
Right.
which creates one of the most, if not the most common issue that people have is their dog being reactive on leash.
Hmm.
There's something that I like to call environmental difficulty assessment. I do a scale of 0 to 5. So 0 would be training at the house,
Hmm.
maybe in a training building, 0 distractions. And then as we add more distractions, it becomes more difficult because those distractions are pulling the dog's focus or attention away from us.
Yep.
You mentioned about building what I like to call, and it's a term I picked up from Michael Ellis, the reward event. What's more fun than playing with you? What's more fun than engaging with you? If somebody is starting to take their puppy out and they're trying to do this environmental exposure, but they find themselves in an environment that perhaps is too difficult for that dog, what is a good approach that they could take to prevent it from happening again? And what should they do in that moment? And I'll give you a more specific example.
Okay.
They take the puppy out, they have the puppy on a harness, which I think a harness is fine in the early stages. If
Yeah.
I want to let a puppy pull around, put the harness on, let them pull. There's a big difference between that and a collar, and a dog can tell the difference.
Hmm.
They have the puppy on the harness, they get in an environment and the puppy starts barking, going crazy, and they really don't know how to control it. They don't have the tools, they don't want to correct it. What's the best course of action in that moment? And then what's the best action or process that they could take, or what you would take to help the dog get over this issue that they had?
So the first thing, I always say is early on when the puppy, and this is something I always say, consult your veterinarian, because I'm not a veterinarian. But when my puppy, he got shipped here when he was 10 weeks old, and so many veterinarians and people said, don't take the puppy outside of the house until at least 16 weeks old, and they have all their series of shots. And there was even a statement that was written by, is it AVSAB or whatever, where they said the risk of um, disease is not outweighed by the risk of non-socializing puppies, right? So in my opinion, when I have a young puppy, 10 weeks old, I'm going to take that risk. And I hate the idea of that risk, scares me. but they've already had at least 1 or 2 of their vaccines. So I take the puppy out early on, and I do very short exposures in different, environments. So I'll have the puppy going to the mall, to Home Depot, to my mom's assisted living while she was still alive, um, grocery stores. I never take the puppy to the park. When I have a puppy that has a problem, for example, they're getting carried away, they're getting too excited, I want to make sure I don't remove the puppy from that situation right away, because it's the similar with aggression. If you remove the dog from that stimulus, their last experience is what they take away. So I have a puppy that's lunging and barking at another puppy or another dog. If I pick him up, put him in the car, or take him away, then his last memory is, "I was acting amok." What I instead do is I hold steady to that limit. In other words, if I'm 10 feet away from that dog, I may take him a couple feet back to kinda decompress, but I'm gonna wait until he figures it out, and I'm gonna help him figure it out by not stressing out, staying calm, certainly not gonna say, "It's okay, it's okay, it's okay," but I will get the dog to understand that it's nothing to really worry about. Just chill out, just relax, just accept what's going on, and when you calm down and when you get past that, it's like a puppy barking in the crate, right? Once they settle into it, they're like, "Okay, what do you want me to do?" "Party." "That's it. Good boy. A lot of treats, a lot of rewards. You worked it out." And now, we move on to the next thing. We go back home, or we go to the next location we're going to or whatever, but I never, ever, ever want to teach the dog that bad behavior gets rewarded, you know?
And that's a good point, staying calm.
Mhm,
And that's difficult for people when they don't know what to do. But by having a game plan, it could help give them the confidence to remain calm because dogs do feed off of our energy.
mhm.
Is there a way in which we recognize the dog is having issues? And in that scenario, I think we said it was a dog that the dog was being reactive to that ended up being the trigger. And if we look at that as being a distraction, and I just consider distractions different forms of external motivators, something
Mhm.
that is pulling the dog's focus away from us, whether it's good or bad, whether it's a perceived threat, something the dog wants. Now they're becoming frustrated, and that ends up coming out through vocalization, pulling, jumping, etc. By working on distractions that are easier for the dog to handle, would you say that is an effective strategy to build the dog back up before we present them in that scenario again where the dog had the issue? So, for example, I do the 0 through 5.
Mhm.
Maybe I'm considering another dog is a level 5. That's the hardest for this dog.
Right.
So I'm going to try to figure out different things that are easier. And I'm going to try to strengthen my reward event, or perhaps what I call a reinforcement event. I call a reinforcement event anytime we're trying to get a dog to do an action. So if I want the dog to sit, come, heel, look at me, I would consider that a reinforcement event. So
Mhm.
building these up while gradually increasing the level of difficulty of the environment based on these external motivational factors. Would you follow a similar approach to that, or do you have a different strategy that perhaps gives faster results?
But you're saying in the sense that the dog is barking at another dog?
Right. So the dog's being reactive to another dog. It's a young puppy, and that's its first instinct. I see a dog, I'm going to start barking at the end of the leash. And as a trainer, I go, okay, the trigger is another dog.
Mhm.
That's a distraction. This dog's not good at handling distractions just yet. Let's work on getting the dog better at me as well, being able to manage the dog with these distractions by enhancing our obedience, by enhancing things like focus and
Yeah.
engagement.
Yeah, so what you're saying, I see what you're saying now. I mean, you're saying that this is what you're learning from the dog, and how are you gonna apply that into a learning process, right?
Correct, yeah.
Right. So yeah, in that situation, absolutely. But I still think it's important at that moment, because if this is the first time I've had the dog this close, first of all, that's my fault, right? Because the first time I take a puppy out, I make sure that he's not gonna bump into another dog at 5, 10 feet away. I'm gonna make sure that dog is far away. So if I fail, then I need to still make sure that my failure doesn't, what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't override his learning. And that is, okay, so there's the dog is close, my dog is barking, and why is he barking? Is the other dog reactive? Is my dog wanting to get there and play? Shouldn't be thinking he's gonna get to play with the other dog, because he never has. So, I still want to achieve some level of calm. I don't wanna just say, "He's barking, okay, that's it, come on, we're leaving," and get him away, because he's gonna remember that dog's reaction, his reaction, and my reaction to it. That's the trifecta, right? So, what I have to do is I have to be calm, so I might grab the dog by the harness, I'm using a harness or the collar, or even just scruff and go, "Hey, shh, stay real calm, take a deep breath." At some point, he's gonna calm his barking down, and then I would reward him or then remove him. I don't like to take a dog in stress and try to make that a learning experience. And I think if he's lunging at a dog or barking at a dog or something, I would certainly try to move my dog back and say to the other person, "Can you please stay there with your dog? I need to work through this for a minute." And most dog owners are usually pretty compliant to help you out when you have a puppy if you ask nicely enough. But if you start screaming at your dog, "Stop it, shut up," and then you say something to them, they're certainly not gonna wanna help you. So, yeah, I mean, I wanna make a learning experience out of everything, especially if it's the very, very first time it happened. There's a heavy imprint on the dog's mind at that moment.
And since we're talking about getting a dog to pay attention to us and what people often call engagement training,
Mhm.
or if it's during the early stages and they're charging or loading the marker, what techniques or how do you teach a young puppy to pay attention to you, even with distractions around? At what age can a puppy start learning cues like look at me or their name? And what imprinting techniques help achieve that kind of focus?
Well, it really depends on the puppy. Some puppies can learn it at 7, 8 weeks, and some people can't grasp it some puppies can't grasp it till, 10, 12, 16 weeks. It's all gonna be individual for the puppy. Now, what I like to do is I like to get the puppy to see me as something exciting, and I kind of cut that excitement into short durations. Shmuley was one, I'll tell you, when I tried to do any hand luring or charging the marker like treats, he didn't care. The girl who bred him said, "Oh, I've been giving him a lot of food because he's gonna be on the plane for so many hours." So he was a chunker, and when I would have food, he'd be like, I've had enough food in the last week to last me for another week, I don't need it." So the first few days, if I had food in my hands, he was like, "Nah, whatever." But I I worked at it, I pushed him and showed him the value in it, and he got it. So, I mean, first thing I did is I used the food as a movement, as a charge marker, as a prey type item, and then the rest of the time, I would just wait and I would just capture behaviors. If he would look at me, mark it, yes, and pay. And I always had treats on me. My pockets were always full of treats, string cheese, kibble, whatever it was. I always had something in my pocket. And the minute he came out of the crate, I had a bait bag on. Boom, you look, yes, 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 and it's it's pretty easy if you really think about how to do it and how to apply it, but you gotta have a strategy, and you also have to have an end game. So the end game for me is I'm gonna work it until he gets it, and when he's excited getting it, I stop. And I think too many people, and I caught myself on a couple occasions, and it's in the course that I did. You see him do it, and he gets it, and I go, "Oh, good. Let's try 1 or 2 more times," and now he just completely shuts off. So now you can't stop now, right? So now you have to get the whole thing again, so he gets it one more time, and then you have to know that was the one, we're done. And I always tell people, even with adult dogs, set a timer for 10, 12 minutes, and no matter how good it's going, stop. Now, if it's going really bad, you should try to go until you get it good. But people most of the time make the mistake that they train past the curve. So if the curve is here, they start to get here and they go, "Oh, he's not getting it. Let's give him a break." I wanna give him a break when he's at the peak. He's at the peak, he's getting it, getting it, getting he's got it, he did it perfect once, twice, stop, put the dog away or just play with the dog now. And that was the same thing I learned that sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was gonna say that's the curse of the dog trainer. One more
Yeah,
rep, one
one
more
more rep.
rep, and as you said, we want the dog leaving wanting more.
Right.
And there was something else you said that's an incredibly powerful technique, and I don't think it's talked about enough. It's something that I believe most professional dog trainers know and probably use, but I think there's a large percentage of the population that is not familiar with this technique and how powerful it could really be within the relationship building, training, and building what people often refer to as the opera dog or the proactive dog.
Mhm.
And the technique that I'm talking about is capturing.
Mhm.
Can you break down capturing a little bit more for someone who doesn't know what capturing is and how it can be implemented into their training system?
Capturing the easiest way that I can describe it is like if you're holding a camera or nowadays an iPhone in front of your face, and the person does something, and then, okay, I go, "Yeah." So now Shmuly's been marked to yes. He climbs up on me. This is a good thing, right? If I go, "Yes, good boy. Yes." I'm capturing him climbing up on me. Now when he goes down, I go, "Yes." That's the same thing. Now if he jumped up and I went, "No," that's a negative, so I'm gonna block it. But capturing it is he does something and I mark it, right? I capture it. I push the little button on my phone, the little camera button here. I push it and I've captured that behavior in his mind. He did something, there was something positive associated with it. He's gonna wanna repeat that, even if he doesn't know the name of it. I didn't say jump up or lay down or spin around or anything, but as the dog does something give an example. My wife used to try to get the dog to go down, and she would teach him down, and it's really cute. Dwayne would start doing like a yoga down, like a downward dog, and she would capture it. She'd go, "Yes, yoga, yoga," and then she started attaching a name to it. I was like, "Damn, I wanna do that." So I would start teaching Shmoo the same thing, right? I would lure him down, but I wouldn't say down, I would just lure him, and when he would do it, I'd mark it. But that's different than capturing, right? That's luring it. If he's just doing it, if he just sits up and looks at me and I say, "Yes, I've captured that." If he puts his paws up on the table and I didn't say anything, yes, I captured that. Now later, if he does it again, I'm not a big fan of capturing or what we call free shaping, and we're getting into real scientific terms, which I hate, but the thing with it is it takes an immense amount of patience, and when you're dealing with a really high drive dog who offers multiple things, you're capturing so many things that you have to somehow organize them again, and I'm always one person. I mean, since the fire, I really have no possessions, but everything I used to have would be in those little plastic organized boxes with the little squares, like all my e-collar prongs or my prong collars or my leads. Everything was in little compartments. So capturing, I like to do like if a dog is offering something and I like it, I'm gonna mark it, I'm gonna capture it. I'm a much bigger fan of luring, like, I really like luring things a lot better, it's more of my style than free shaping or capturing things.
Yeah, and if I could share the way that I like to use capturing, which is different from free shaping for someone who doesn't know, this is often referred to as successive approximation. We have a goal. We want the dog to be able to do that goal, but we set the scenario up and then we mark and reward as the dog gets closer and closer to doing the behavior. I use this with my scent detection. I like to free shape the dog sticking their head into the container
Mhm.
where I'm going to be placing the odor, and it works out really well. It was a technique that I learned from My buddy Marty, who runs the canine unit down in Texas, far Texas, and he showed me how he does his scent detection system. And what he would do is he would bring the puppy out, and there would be a climb bed, and he would wait for the puppy to jump up on the climb bed. So he already had that in mind, kind of like free shaping, but the dog was already doing it. So you could
Mhm.
say it's kind of capturing as well, because capturing, the dog's already completing the behavior.
Mhm.
So he would do that. And so that's what I do. And then the next time I bring the dog or the puppy out, the same climb bed is there, but now I have a cinder block that I might be using for scent work. And so it's something new. The dog jumps up on the climb bed, nothing happens. They go, "What's this?" They stick their head in it. Boom, now I mark that. With new puppies, the way that I like to use capturing is just like you said, they do something we like. They look at me, they sit, they go to their bed. And this is what I tell my clients. I'm like, anytime your dog does something that you like inside the house, you capture that. And you capture it
Mhm.
by using a marker that the dog has been classically conditioned to. And I'm saying this for people that don't know this
Right.
terminology. I know you do. So, like a marker, we condition it, classical conditioning, yes, feed, yes, feed. Eventually, yes means food. Dog gets excited when they hear yes. So the dog goes to their bed. Yes. Dog comes over. We didn't ask the dog to go to the bed, but the dog going to the bed made the reward magically appear. And something else you said that I say a lot with the people I work with is a Pez dispenser. I want the dog to believe that I always have treats, even if they don't see it.
Yep.
And for me, capturing has helped me facilitate that with dogs, where they do something I like, I mark and reward. They didn't see the reward. I didn't ask them to do the behavior, but their behavior made that reward magically appear.
Mhm.
But I'm also on the same side with you as far as actively teaching behaviors. I love luring. I use luring for so many different behaviors. And then once those behaviors are getting closer to being set, then I start incorporating toys into the training. And I find all this
Right.
stuff very fascinating because, as I said earlier, I was talking to Ivan, and he's not a massive fan of luring. And he teaches mostly everything from using toys and using play. Now,
Mhm.
this is coming from a second source. So anyone who's listening, don't take it as gospel because I'm saying something that someone else said. I could be saying it slightly incorrect. It's like the telephone game.
Yeah.
So make sure you get it from the source. Ivan is a genius when it comes to dog training. But I love that. And I love that you use capturing. And uh, it makes me think about the course that you also recently created that you mentioned. What motivated you to create the course, the My First 30 Days with My Puppy? Did you see a specific need in the community that wasn't being met by perhaps books or traditional classes for a new puppy?
Yeah, there's a couple things. I remember early on when I was training dogs, my veterinarian would just send me major behavior cases, and she said, "We don't really need you for the young dogs or the good dogs." And I thought to myself, "We actually do, right? Like, if you got me in on those dogs, you wouldn't need me for these cases." So so I get so many questions from people about puppies. I did a little crate course, like a short mini course on teaching people the basic ideas. Like, these are the 10 steps you need to get your dog to be crate trained. I never saw a like a journal type course where when somebody gets a puppy, what are they gonna do, right? What's step 1? And what does it look like throughout the day? People were always saying, "Oh, you should make a course or you should make a video, a day in the life of Robert Cabral." Well, it's really boring because 'cause I'm the most boring human being on the planet. But when it comes to the puppy thing, I was actually doing stuff, right? I would get up 5 o'clock in the morning in my pajamas, open the crate door, and it's all on film. So, I just had a GoPro, I set it up, I stumble out, boom, undo the cover, wait for the dog, open the door, get him outside, take the GoPro with me, he goes potty, good potty, here's a cookie. Okay, go back and go to sleep, I need another hour's sleep. But puppy courses are generally set up to be, I show you step 1, 2, 3, and, "Hey, look at my puppy, he's doing it perfectly." But it doesn't work like that, right? And that's the sad thing for people when they see your dog or my dog, and a lot of my instruction is geared towards that. But the when I did the shelter course, it was dogs that were like, "I don't know anything about them. These are brand new dogs. They've never been taught anything." When my puppy came in the house, I documented the very first time all my dogs see them. see him. And then the, hand feeding. How did I teach the luring? Because in the beginning, he wouldn't lure. I couldn't lure him. And I was, working with, via the phone, Peter and Connie Scherk in Germany, who are, in my opinion, the greatest to ever play the game. I got information from them. There's things I was doing that they were teaching, like the collecting game, and it didn't work. I can tell you right now, it was so much stuff I tried to do with him didn't work, and learning through watching somebody's failure can also be a really good way to learn. So, in this course, unlike anything I've ever done, you see a lot of my stumbling blocks with the puppy, but coupled with that is every experience. Okay, here's the first time I ever took him to Home Depot. I don't know what's gonna happen. Most dog trainers, they're gonna say, "Okay, well, we're gonna edit that part out." But this course ended up being 18 hours plus long, shot over there's 30 days of videos, including when I picked him in Germany, what I was looking for, playing with him for the first time when he was, I think, 7 weeks old, and I picked him out of a litter of 12. And I think people have seen so many videos now, little reels I put up or instructional videos I put up of him doing stuff now, and they're like, "God, he's so well trained." So, maybe I hedged my bets a little bit, like, I didn't release the course until he was a year and a half old, like, what if he would have been really screwed up at that point? But he turned out to be a really nice dog. He's very social. He has, a really good defensive sport aggression. He's a very dominant, powerful dog, but he turned out to be a really nice dog. He's good with all our dogs. He's good socially. I can take him to a restaurant. He'll lay under the table and, hang out with me or whatever. And all the stuff I did early on, shaping the heeling, the positions, the leash walking or whatever, all paid off in spades because he's a great dog. So, people can certainly go and see on any of my channels what my dog looks like now, and then they can say, "Well, okay, now this is from day 1 till day 30. This is what I did early on, and this is the result." So, and that's something people don't often do, like, that you don't see from that period all the way through, and I think those 30 days are really important for a dog. Those first 30 days, how that dog is gonna experience this time and build this relationship. I mean, my dog will sleep on my head. When Janet gets out of bed, he's on my head. He's constantly like, no, he's very, very affectionate. He's extremely affectionate. But also, if I put a sleeve on, it's the gloves are off. It's like if your brother was Hickson Gracie, I mean, you'd be, you're on the mat, you're doing it for real. That's how he is with me. He doesn't like go, oh, okay, I can't bite you. You're my dad. No, 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 no. He's for real. Like he's really going to come in. And I taught him that. I taught him to be very confident. I taught him to be very strong, very powerful. He's strong and powerful with people who he's working with. And those 30 days shaped a lot of that. Like I show how I taught him the tug work and how I taught him to out because there's different ways people teach puppies how to out. There's certainly very motivational ways, and there's certainly very harsh ways to do it. And I can tell you that my dog has an incredible out command, and I never yell at him for it. If he has a ball or a tug, and if I say to him, "Aus," he'll out it just like if you take another dog, he's like, "Aus," this really strong command. He's clear on the picture, 100%.
And as you said, when you show mistakes, I believe that's something that's very much appreciated within the community of people that are interested in dog training.
Mhm.
Anytime I've posted a video on YouTube where I leave the mistakes in, there's often many, not just one, people commenting, telling me that they appreciate seeing the mistakes. And
Mhm.
it's not this perfectly smooth path that we follow where we never hit any speed bumps.
Yeah.
So seeing you being able to navigate through those speed bumps and still end up with the results that you want, I think is very helpful.
Yeah.
As well as I wanna point out that you said it's 18 hours. That sounds a little overwhelming, but I'm assuming your intention is not for someone to sit down and watch it 18 hours through, but perhaps as if they're training with you. So,
Yeah.
like, my training partner is Robert Cabral. I'm gonna watch today's 20 25-minute
Mhm.
segment, and I'm gonna try to replicate that. Is that or was that your intentions?
Yeah, so I kinda had this vision, like, so some days are only 20 minutes or 15 minutes or 10 minutes even, and some days are an hour. And that's how it's gonna be with your dog. Like, "Hey, you know what? You're busy, you're working, you don't get to train your dog that much, but you can do 10 minutes. You can do something with them." And my vision with this is, and I've never said this before, it's kinda funny. Like, my vision is person signs up, they log in, they're on their iPad, they're in bed at night, and they watch day 1. And then the next day, they go, "Okay, here's 10 notes I made from this. This is what I'm gonna do with my dog." And if you think about it, what's the greatest way of learning is repetition. So day 1, day 2, day 3, day 13, day 19, day 30, I'm still doing all the same stuff. But how often do you get to see that progression day after day after day until day 30? And on day 30, it's not perfect, but it's certainly setting into the mind of me and the dog. I
Mm,
hate when people put these unrealistic expectations on dogs and puppies and think that they have to know all these things. When I talked to the person telling you about, the one trainer who said at 2.5 years, a dog can't do secondary obedience. And this guy has won world championships. He's one of the greatest trainers in the world. And I had my friend Frank Phillips come out when Shmoo was, I think, 7, 8, 9 months old, and we were doing stuff. He goes, "I can't believe your dog knows how to do a transport. He's 9 months old." Well, Oscar showed me how to do the transport, and then I learned some other stuff from Peter and Connie Sherrick. So I was teaching him all these things, and I said, "Well, he doesn't do anything really well." And he said, "Well, do you know when he has to do it really well?" And I said, "No." And he said, "In November of 2028." Like, that's when he's 3 years old. That's when the championships are. And he said, anything before that is ridiculous for you to even think that your dog should know something perfect. And taking that, as a martial artist, you're a very A-type personality like me. Everything has to be perfect, right? We want everything. We want our website to be perfect. We want our courses to be perfect. But when we're kind of, carving something, we can make that perfect. But when we're dealing with a human element, a human or animal emotions and feelings and all these things, sometimes it's not perfect. Sometimes we have to work past the imperfections and embrace those imperfections, because maybe Shmuley won't do IGP. Like, I certainly didn't get him just to do IGP, to say that if he doesn't do it well, I'm not going to say, "Oh, I'll get rid of him, get another dog." No, I got him because I love him and I would like him to do
mm,
IGP. But, Goofy, I got to do IGP. He didn't love it. He hated the protection phase because the people who taught it to him early on screwed him up. I said, "Okay,
mm.
you're my boy. What do you want to do? My man, whatever you want to do, we're in this together. Till you take your last breath on this earth, I'm your man and I got your back." So I never thought about giving up on it, but watching the process that I did for these first 30 days, and then kind of just checking little things like either my membership section or YouTube or Facebook or whatever, wherever I've got videos, which are all over. Um, I enjoy showing these things as much as I can for free, because there's a lot of people who need this information. I'm sure you get it too. You're
Mhm.
known all over the world. And if you can affect somebody in the Middle East or in some Asian country who can't afford our monthly membership or our courses that we sell, I mean, we've really done an amazing service for somebody. And that's my greatest joy, is when I get a message from somebody who says, "Oh my God, I followed your stuff and I had the worst dog and now he's amazing." I'm like, boom, and I didn't even join your membership section. Awesome. You know, the membership section is there for people who can afford it, but I've got over 1,000+ videos on YouTube that'll teach you how to do everything that you possibly need for free.
I absolutely love that answer. And if puppy owners only take one lesson from your approach, what do you hope it is? In other words, what core principles will make the biggest difference in their lifelong relationship with their dog?
Be fair to your dog and give your dog the life they should have, not the life you want them to have. In other words, don't. I made a shirt. I should have worn it today. It says, "You got the dog you got," people constantly say to me, they said, my dog just, he just doesn't really want to do the protection work. And I'm no expert on protection. I mean, you want to talk to Peter Schick, you want to talk to Ivan, you want to talk to Frank Phillips, you want to talk to the greatest to play Florian Knobel, you want to talk to the greatest to play the game. I only say I'm an advocate for the dogs. I'm not a protection dog or sport dog expert. I know dogs, and I've titled dogs, I've trained dogs in the sports. I'm always want to be a champion for the dog. And if the dog's not cut out for it, and you got a puppy for agility, but he just can't do it, he doesn't have the physical ability or the temperament for it, let your dog have a happy life and embrace the dog you got, because you're all he has, or she has. And you've got to honor that. And you've got to be fair to your dog and not just give up on him and say, well, I'm going to rehome and get another one. I think there's a curse to people who do that. Your dog would never give up on you.
That was poetry. And
No,
you brought decades of wisdom to this conversation. Where can
thanks.
people go to keep learning directly from you?
I mean, the best thing really, I mean, if you want to join my online training, I've got a couple courses and a membership, a monthly membership that you can access all of it. And that's just on my site, robertcabral.com. But I would certainly think there's so much free information that if you just want to get a taste and get your feet wet, just check out YouTube. Or, YouTube has the most educational stuff. The Instagram and Facebook, I'm always hitting topics that people need to hear, and, answering questions and helping people that way. But I would say between my site and YouTube would give you a good portion of what I've got.
Thank you so much, Robert. And for everyone else, remember, it's not about perfection. It's about showing up every day for your dog. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Nate.